Beethoven, Wagner, Mahler, Schoenberg. They created a spirit of confrontation and experiment that has fired 20th century composers. But in the 1980s, Robin Holloway questions the inevitability of progress in this direction. Does new music have to be so new?
There just is a prevailing sense that things have not gone right. That's putting it at its worst, that they could have gone better, they should have gone better. But putting it not at its worst, they might at least have gone different. It could have taken that corner. It could have taken that road.
The critic, Paul Griffiths.
I'm not quite sure what the point is, what is being achieved by creating a half-hour, admittedly and magnificently scored, beautifully put together piece, but which uses so much the language of 1910 that it could almost have been written at that time.
Those with ears to hear would see that Seascape and Harvest is absolutely not a late Romantic pastiche. Its lengths, its proportions, its phrasing, the way it's intercut, the placing of its architectural events is actually, in its asymmetry, in its almost abstraction from the warm surface of the material, is something quite different. That could only have happened as a result of proportion in Stravinsky, as a result of Schoenberg's very close, ever tighter use of the 12 chromatic notes. I don't actually like the particular sound of what Schoenberg does, but the way he thought about the organization of notes has changed the way everyone perceives the organization of notes.
Bayan, Northcott.
You've got to remember that this piece was written for a quite specific purpose in the first place, which is to please the conductor. Robin Holloway knows the sort of works that Simon Rattle conducts particularly well: Wagner, Strauss, Mahler, Elgar, and so on. And he's set out to write a specific tribute. There are lots of near quotes in the piece, bits that are almost Tristan and Isolde, a bit that almost turns into Mahler's Fourth Symphony, and so on.
I know the kind of musician he is. I know the sort of things he does well, and the sort of particular inspiration that he brings to a certain kind of music. And it seems to me absolutely foolish not to write for that, not to use that. You know your artist, you know your man, you know the building it's going to happen in, you know the players to a certain extent. It would be flying in the face of fortune not to use all that for all it's worth.
I remember one of the first reviews said the orchestra played this piece with obvious enthusiasm. And I read that with a great deal of pleasure until I realized that that was actually a negative criticism, as though we shouldn't enjoy it, as though we should be in a hair shirt.
It's a kind of orgy of sound, attempting to evoke colours, sights, sounds, sense impressions of all kind, whether looking at water or looking at landscape.
It's as though it's trying to conjure up some very important ghost, something which was in the closet and hidden to be ashamed of. And if one comes out with childish or pleasurable similes, it's not just cod psychoanalysis. It's something that's there very much, and is there very much in the English psyche. We've never stopped being a romantic tradition here. Even in the work of a painter like Francis Bacon, there's still an intensely romantic and expressive kind of Mahlerian substance to the whole thing. One has to accept that. And so all these things will come out together. Robin has done something that's not just a regression. It's something that's very, very positive, and it's a positive step forward. But it is in a way like throwing down the gauntlet.
It's basically a celebration and an evocation of richness, abundance, but it takes quite a hefty look at the opposite of those things, at sterility, barrenness, destructiveness, blackness. In every political and social advance, there has been only advantage. To return to a former state of society would be absolutely deplorable. But I think in almost every other term, like what things look like what people feel about things, like how they behave, all that seems to me to have become greatly cheapened and debased.
There have always been problems. Don't you think Mozart had problems? Don't you think Beethoven had problems? Don't you think life looked complex to them? Life is a complex thing. Life has always been a mess. It's a multiplied mess now because we have 5 million times more people on this earth and we can see all the mess going on. But it always has been a mess. And yet, look what we have at composers at our disposal. We have radio stations, we have orchestras, we potentially have recordings, there's television. There's so many elements that can reach a larger public and allow us to do the most extraordinary things nowadays that weren't possible before. It takes a lot. Why not explore rather than just stay in the same territory?
The composer George Benjamin keeps faith in progress. He and Harrison Birtwistle remain ambitious for change.
It's quite galling to realize that young composers are just not going to be very interested in anything I'm likely to write, or only if I change my spots completely. But weighed in the balance against the attempt to broaden the musical pleasure of an altogether different, more general audience, I just count that as naught. I don't want to contribute to sort of scientific discovery. I want to contribute to richness of expression.
The nature of real tradition, healthy tradition, is something which changes, something which transforms, something which develops. With each generation, there should be a spring, something new, a new way of hearing. That is seen in nature, that is seen in our lives. That is what tradition has been and should be. We take tradition as being lazy, taking the old rules, keeping them going, because it's too risky, it's too dangerous, and it requires things that we don't want to. It's uncomfortable to move out of that. And tradition means passing over and keeping the actual rules. Tradition should be deeper down than that. It should be something which is alive and something which is thriving. Innovation is tradition. That's what it should be, and that's how I see music.
What's important to me is that historically, that every point of history or at any point of where we are is absolutely unique. And it's that absolutely unique position where we are which gives real value to what we do. And so to go back to something which already existed, it just simply means that you're not free, because no matter which aspect of it you're taking from the past, whether it's the harmony, the rhythm, I mean, whatever you want to take, you're not doing it from the same position as the people who invented it in the first place. And for me, that's a deadly situation.
Of course it would be futile to replicate what's already there. The whole challenge, the whole thrill, is to find new life, new possibilities, new ways of organizing and using those very sounds, taking them further, making them do things they never did before, enriching, thickening, cross-pollinating the language in a way that seems to me absolutely of our own time, because the attitude behind it could only be of now, although of course it is an attitude to the past.
It depends whether you see art as a means of confrontation or a means of titillation. And then again, I would say that if I thought that my role as a creator was to provide this for an audience that already has a sort of sensibility about what he thinks is seductive, I don't think by going back into the past and simply aping it and taking the gloss from it, you're providing those people which were robbed of it something which they would want.
Well, I think artists do come, very broadly speaking, in two types. There is the prophet, visionary type, and there is the entertainer, pleasure giver, sort of comfort giver type. Oh, that's very broad and very crude, but there are these two types, and I, above all, wish to give pleasure, wish to give a sense of exuberance and vitality.
Robin, I think, is trying to present a slightly tongue-in-cheek history of music with people like him as the savior. It's cute, it's nice. And I perhaps to write the music, he must feel that. For those of us playing, when you're presented with a first-rate piece of music, you know it. The greatest music transcends time. That's why we must carry on re-exploring the works of Beethoven, Haydn, Bach, whatever. It's not purely as a historical exercise to put contemporary music into context. It's to carry on exploring the truths that are still true. Each generation sees them through a different mirror, but they're still there with their own innate power. And that's certainly true of all the pieces we've played in this program, all of them in their different ways, masterpieces.